Maria, Korean, our chief guest, Mr. Patnaik, George, Nandakumar, the full Mr. Govind, the whole lot of friends here. A wonderful opportunity. I don't think I've had a chance to come here for 3+ years to meet people, so it is quite an inspiring and energizing opportunity to catch up. A few weeks ago when Maria asked me if I would be the keynote speaker, and before I said yes, she had already sent me the topic, right? So all I did, if you remember, Maria, I put a smiley and sent. I didn't say anything, right? And she had chosen the topic as the future of banking, which is very easy. The answer is bright. So I said, yes, I will do it. So I'm going to try and talk to you about what I see, maybe the way ahead, how the world will look. She probably chose this topic because when I joined the bank in 2010, I don't know if you remember, Maria, she had done an article and asked me to comment on what 2020 will look like. I think by a stroke of luck, I said a few things. And true to her, to 2020, many of them turned out to be true. So she covered in 2020 and looked back whether I had bullshitted or I had said the truth. Thankfully, it worked out. More or many of the predictions came true. So it's like an astrologer, right? When you go to an astrologer, he tells you something. 50% of the time, he'll be right. Right? So I got the lucky side of the being right. So this morning when I was thinking about what I should speak, or actually late last evening, Rajesh Nair, who's in the hall, texted me saying, I believe you're talking about future of banking tomorrow. So I got a little nervous saying, have I prepared enough? So I did the obvious stuff that all of us do, did a chat GPT, right? Which I notice is the cover story of the, I don't read or speak Malayalam, but I can see in the cover story is about chat GPT. So I did the usual chat GPT. True to what, chat GPT was down last evening, right? So I was left with nothing to say. So I said, I'll figure it out myself. If you talk about banking, it is almost imperative that people start talking about digital and technology and how the world of banking or world of finance is changing and technology will reshape everything. That is true. I mean, how can you argue about it, right? I mean, if in 2005 or 2000 or 2005, somebody had said this would be the future of banking, we would have all laughed, right? Today it is as they say, it's the 79th organ in a human being. That we all have 78. This is the 79th organ in a human being, right? We can't live without this device. I can see Mr. Patnaik checking whether his 79th organ is there or not, right? But it is true. We wake up to it, we go to bed with it, wake up, touch it, feel it, it works for us. But I thought I would talk less about the obvious. I mean, the obvious is technology is reshaping lives. Technology will influence everything we do. And I am of the view that it's no longer a nice to do, it's your drumbeat, it's a core, it's the oxygen. I don't believe any longer technology is a bolt-on or a band-aid. It is the core of every platform. And all conversations are around how that is given. In fact, when we coined a line which our MC nicely portrayed for me, was the line we said is digital at the fore, human at the core. And we very firmly believe in it. I personally believe in it. I mean, all the technology in the world is great, but I wonder if it can substitute this connect that we have. During COVID, we were all behind a screen, quite effective, efficient, but I think we missed that human connect. And here is the marketing plug for Federal Bank. I don't know if you've all seen our latest advertising campaign. I hope you've seen it. Rishta aapse, sirf aap se nahi hai. That is our campaign, right? We are saying in a world of high technology, in a world of everything going digital, we still believe the human connect and the relationship between people is paramount. And I genuinely say, because the topic of today being future of banking, and we're talking about what the future holds, who knows. But I know for a fact that yes, as much as technology will shape and drive the future of banking, a future of mankind, I have a personal phrase that the future of digital is human. The future of digital is human. In fact, ChatGPT and AI that we're talking of is what? Is just trying to take all our human learnings of years and put it in a digital fashion. So it's actually, digital is being shaped by human. So that's why my statement is the future of digital is human. In many ways, I think the future of banking is human. right? So when I talk about the future of banking and we're talking about how bright it is, let me try and give you some of the insights. And she's warned us that it should be 20 minutes. I'll finish earlier, right? Let me try and lay out some of the thoughts around. When Mr. Patnaik was speaking about, he said the credit expansion in country, credit as a percentage of GDP in India is about 58%, and in most advanced economies it's north of 100, which is true. You could look out any parameters from a financial services point of view, insurance penetration, credit penetration, bank accounts. Thankfully, after Jan Dhan, the number of bank accounts opened it's still only 50, 60 crores. A country of 140 crore people, you're talking of the levels of penetration that needs to happen is manifold. All of us remember when Bill Gates wrote his book, Road Ahead, 2598, so 25, 26 years back. One line of his was, banking is a necessity. He doesn't know what banks is required or not. That is the vision of the man, which I think holds true today. Banking is a requirement. Banking will be a requirement 20 years ahead. Whether the banks as we know it today, as we knew it 10 years ago, as we probably will be different in 5, 10 years, I would argue yes. But again, if you look at, like in life insurance, if you look at if you compare GDP per capita, right? India's GDP per capita, I say in a purchasing power parity equal terms, is about $7,000. You take the US or the UAE, which is closer to our part of the world, it's $70,000. Now, bank branches per human being in our country for adults, working adults, is about 20 branches per 100,000 adults. In some of these advanced economies where the per capita GDP is much higher, the bank branches per 100,000 adults is still much higher. Having said that, over the last 5, 7 years, there is a trend, and it is noticeable, that the number of branches is coming down. Like a few weeks ago, I was in the Middle East on a client visit, and checking out, say, the leading banks there, they've actually started sizing down or paring down of the number of branches. They're a small country, so they can afford to do things very differently. But even if you go to the US or stuff like that, the number of branches per, there's a certain degree of realignment of resources or reallocation of resources that is happening. But history suggests that there is an inverse proportionality to rising income and number of branches of a bank coming down, which is only obvious, right? As more and more sophisticated offerings come and people are getting wealthier, chances are they're doing more self-service and technology is enabling. But our country, as I see it, we are about 125,000 bank branches across the country. This is the organized formal banking. There's a bunch of stuff. Then our NBFC colleagues have their own branches. And this is just it's a continuous spectrum. But if you just singularly look at bank branches, we have about 125,000 bank branches. And with the public sector merger, it's sort of plateaued for the last 2 years. I would hazard a guess that over the next few years, that you will see bank branches actually going up. Our own bank, we had, in my first few years in the bank, we doubled our network. We were about 600 odd branches when I came. We took it about 1,200 branches. Then about 3 to 4 years, we actually froze. We did not add branches. We said we will A, go digital, B, we will get more value from where the branches that we've launched. But in the last 2 years again, we are back. We're doing about 100 branches a year. And this is not because we suddenly had more money that we had to move branches, but we just discovered, or we are discovering, that in our country, the layering of society requires multifaceted engagement with clients in different geographies of different economic profile and of different digital orientation. So you're going to find that the India that we are all in, if you map it out with digital capability and economic prosperity, and just do the simple math of most digitally aware, more economic, and least digital, different ways of serving will be required. So there are so many Indias within India that we need multiple modes of serving. And remember, I would argue that bank branches is our conventional thought is a physical brick and mortar situation where there are 4 clerks and 4 officers and people are walking in and out. That is one definition of the branch. Like I pointed out, a phone is a branch, but we've just launched, and I think we are the first in the country to go with it. We have now fully fitted out digital buses which are as branches. In Madurai and in Lucknow, we have a fully fitted out bus which is serving the exact thing that you would do if you walk into a branch. Exactly whatever you do. So in Madurai and in Lucknow, the bus goes and parks itself in different locations on different days of the week, and customers can come and do their branch banking just the way they would do it in a branch. Now, this is one definition today. You could argue in 3 years, 5 years from now, or 2 years from now, a motorcycle fitted with it could be a branch, a mobile fitted with devices. So all I'm suggesting is that the concept of branches and banking expansion will find new and innovative solutions to meet the demands of our nation, which I just mentioned is underserved even today. Right? Like I said, banking is required. Whether banks are required is another phenomenon, but for the foreseeable future, just as we saw the last 10, 15 years, massive expansion, massive innovation of technology, and all of that is shaping the future of banking. That would continue, but I would argue that you will find many more innovative presentations of the concept of a branch presenting in front of yourself, and you will suit the one that meets your needs as best as you would want. I mean, in this audience, there's a bunch of people right up front who are at one stage of life, and a bunch of people right at the back at another economic and chronological stage of life. Your needs will be very different. And the role and the task of the banks and the banking is to ensure that it's able to rise up to it. Now, if that's the story of banks and branches going to expand, some of you may have heard a wonderful speech by a gentleman called Deepak Bagla yesterday on, it's been doing the rounds, and if you've not seen it, please take a look at it. It's about 18 minutes. It's an outstanding presentation of the India opportunity. So I'm not going to repeat it. But there's one point that he mentioned was just quite striking. Every minute in India, 30 people are moving from a village to a city. Every minute in India. That is a telling story. Now, if you look at some of the statistics that's played out, if India in 2047, which is when India is 100, when we'll be probably $20 trillion economy or more, and per capita is $10,000 or more, all of that are fascinating and very inspiring. To meet those needs, you need societies to develop in such a fashion that it can't be concentrated in the current 8 tier 1 cities or in the 60 or 70 tier 2 cities. You're going to find a massive formation of new cities that are going to form tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and that if you take the statistic of 30, every minute 30 Indians are moving from a village to a city, you're going to talk of another 100 odd cities that are going to form, maybe 100, maybe more tier 2 cities that are going to come up, and another 150 odd tier 1 cities that are going to come up, and another 300 odd tier 3 cities. Now, this whole concept of urban, rural and urban, first the line is thinning, right? It's no longer, it's a large continuum. And in this concept of continuum, banks are going to find, again, go back to my first point, how are you going to serve people in this whole evolving ecosystem where there's a large continuum, and today we have thought about branches. I have X branches in semi-urban, Y branches in rural, I have Z branches in city, urban. That whole concept is going to sort of merge into one, into the other, to the other. So I think the phenomenon of urban is going to become so material, and the needs of each of those societies are going to be so important to serve that yet again you will find that the ability to meet their financial requirements. Mr. Patnaik so beautifully said that insurance, the number of people, aspiration, having more cars and more vehicles and more televisions and so on. And so how are you going to meet those needs? Financing is required. Now again, if you go back to whether it's NBFC finance, bank finance, that's a reach and cost of funds game. But will the need be there? Absolutely yes. Will human aspirations be any less? I would argue no. So to meet all of this in an emerging urban world, yet again I would make the case that you would have many more requirements for both finance and the ability to serve, and I'm assuming the ability to serve is through the financial services system, the organized system. So yet again, the future of banking in that dimension looks quite riveting. Now, all this is fine. Infrastructure, right? This is the story of India. We know infrastructure investment is a force multiplier, right? As they say, 1 rupee into infrastructure is 3.6 times reward, as opposed to giving it away as a dole. The number of ports, the number of airports, the number of, any measure of infrastructure development that we are talking of. This year's budget is talking of about 10 trillion. But a World Bank report some time back pointed out, for India to be the country that we want to be, not very far from now, in the next 5 to 7 years, we need close to $700 billion of investment in infrastructure, right? Infrastructure funding is a game in itself. Banks, all of us, people in this room, are the depositors in a bank. So as a bank, our source of money is retail deposits, largely. Now, retail deposit, by definition, Mr. Ravi Mohan knows better than any of us, is both, typically it's 1 to 3 years. That's where they put their money in. They're not going to put it for 20, 30 years. But infrastructure projects have a very long payback. It's 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, depending on the kind of projects that are. So the funding of infrastructure is a new capability. The Indian bond markets are not so evolved that you have long-term money available at call. So the nature of banking in the coming years is going to be quite different from the nature of banking that we've all conventionally thought about. That will continue, but to fund the massive infrastructure requirement of the country, which is in the order of $500, $700, $800 billion, you're talking of another cohort of money that needs to come in. Yet again, you're going to find these are opportunities in the concept of the future of banking is bright. You're going to find infrastructure funding and the capability and the technological ability and the technical capability to do that is going to be another fascinating area. And particularly for young students, please think about your learnings on how financial instruments are going to be created and how project financing is going to be done and how long-term funding is going to be done, because it's a relatively underdeveloped part of India's past and the biggest part of India's future. So many of you are going to find a remarkable opportunity. The more you get your game on this is going to be an interesting part of our future. About a year and a half back, in fact, at the peak of COVID, some of you know, IFC, the World Bank International Financial Corporation, took an investment in Federal Bank. They were they put in a green equity into Federal Bank. The first and only green equity of IFC in Asia is in Federal Bank. They took it about a year and a half back. The commitment we made is that as a bank, we have certain principles of ESG, which we are quite devotedly following. And more importantly, we believe that's socially good, economically good, and the future of the world. We have to be good corporate citizens. So when we committed to going green, so to say, in every aspect, one of that was financing requirements of projects and properties and capabilities that are going to be socially relevant, socially good, and most importantly, carbon neutral, more green in nature. So when we talk about green, this is just one. We are a 1.5% share of banking system in India, right? And we can be big, but we are never going to be 10% share. So the entire ecosystem of banking has to fund and grow this whole green economy, and this is now, India is committed by 2070 to be net zero. To be net zero, the kind of development that is required in this whole green space, this is mind-boggling. The numbers are. So you would find this whole community of both ability to fund and green. And I'm here a marketing plug for Federal Bank. We just won IFC, which is the World Bank Asia's first climate financing, highest climate financing done in the last year. Right? We won the award just 2 weeks ago. And that's thank you. But I think the important point I was going to suggest is, if a bank which is about 1.5% share is committing to do $2 billion of green financing in the next 2 years, which is our commitment to ourselves and to the IFC, you can see the scale of that. And here again, I go back to my earlier point on infrastructure financing and green. These are new skills that we all have to learn. This didn't exist 5-10 years ago. Many of us who've been, all of us started the meeting by saying we're lifelong learners. We have no choice but to be lifelong learners, because this is a space that is evolving under our nose, and rapidly so. Just as technology is reshaping banking, the ingredients of what technology can do to change the shape of the world is changing so rapidly that I would argue that Many of us, however long we've served, we haven't seen a trailer. We've probably seen only a trailer. So to my younger colleagues, the others who are in your mid-career, think about how you are rewiring your learnings to be able to do these capabilities. Now all this said and done, we are in a hyper-connected world, but the future lies in hyper-local activities. Just as grand and as big the world is shaping out to be, it's all about hyper-local activities. Just as Amazon has become so big, for every Amazon there is a Meesho. As all of you know, Meesho is serving the rural, semi-urban, the less, it's more vernacular, and it's reaching out to, it's doing almost identically what Amazon is doing, but for a very different cohort of human beings. And that is just an example of how this whole hyper-localization in the world where technology is shaping data availability, and virtually everybody here, we like it or not, we are leaving a digital footprint. You transfer money from A to B using your mobile phone, you left a digital footprint. You scroll some site, you left a digital footprint. So unwittingly, we are leaving a digital footprint. Well, you could, again, this Deepak Bagla's speech talks about out of every 3 people coming onto the net, 2 are coming from rural India, right? And like Mahatma Gandhi said, India lives in its villages. 50, 60, 70% of our population lives in its villages. As that more and more villages are getting more and more digital, you're talking of how our footprint that we are leaving is leaving such an immense amount of data that the new technologies of data science is enabling people to hyper-localize, hyper-personalize. So there is a huge scope of hyper-everything, and that's going to get as micro as possible. Again, technology and analytics and use of data are no longer the task of a few inside a research center. It is right front and center in our day-to-day life. I've spoken for long. Let me just try and give you some more thoughts and then bring it to a close. We are talking of India from a point of view of not just this year, 5, 10, 15 years, however long we take as a horizon for forecasting. Trade, today our exports is about $300 billion, right? All counts suggest it will be $1 trillion in the next 5 to 7 years. That's 3 times exports, right? Now, trade, most of us think of banks as term loans or working capital. But another emerging massive facet of banking is financing trade, financing transactions. And the whole gamut of transactions that is going through the banking system. Yesterday, the Prime Minister of India and the Prime Minister of Singapore flagged off a fundamentally path-breaking manner of how remittances are going to happen. Sitting at your home in Singapore, you could transfer up to 60,000 rupees to your uncle in Kochi, or the reverse can happen, and suddenly it will completely disintermediate a whole financial system that existed, because the whole UPI and their whatever the pay now or whatever that is just completely disintermediating. And this is only the beginning of how transaction flow is going to happen across nations, cross-border. So trade transactions are all getting to be big part of the future of banking. Now all these great words are fine, but talent, right? Where are we going to find these talent? It's not going to land from heaven. It's not going to suddenly surface from nowhere and say, it's a grooming of capability irrespective of your age and stage of life. First is a mindset orientation saying we need to completely rewire ourselves to meet the needs of tomorrow. Institutions, individuals have to first believe that what we know is only a trailer. What we know is inadequate. I think a sense of restless paranoia is paramount to make sure that we are best prepared for this emerging space in front of us. So friends, I spoke about branches, I spoke about urban, I spoke about infrastructure, I spoke about green, I spoke about hyper-personalization, I spoke about trade and transactions. So if you look at the first alphabets of all these thoughts, it's BRIGHT, which is bright, and that is the future of banking. So thank you very much.